It's time for the AFC North draft grades, division by division, team by team. Baltimore Ravens, Cincinnati Bengals, Cleveland Browns, and the Pittsburgh Steelers grading the 2024 NFL Draft right now.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson, as always, at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We appreciate everybody out there, our everydayers, and we appreciate it when you hit subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. We're getting into the AFC North here, and alphabetical, starting with the Baltimore Ravens, Matt, who had a draft that, pre-episode production meeting here. I asked you what's the superlative word that you could come up with for the Baltimore Ravens draft? And we couldn't really think of anything because they kind of just sat back and let the draft come to them. And I've heard GM Eric DeCosta talk about this. He's like, there's always a good player there. And I love the way he looks at it like that. And there was a good player there for them, a guy that probably before the day started, they thought, probably less than 50% chance that Nate Wiggins is sitting there on the board for us at pick number 30. Yet he was there, and he's the highest on their board, so they turn in the card, and there you go. Nate Wiggins, their selection in round 1. They come back in round 2 with an offensive tackle, probably stealing him away from a couple teams that might have been right behind them on the draft board. Maybe we'll never know. But Roger Rosengarten, offensive tackle out of Washington in round 2. Third round selection, Adisa Isaac, a lengthy edge rusher out of Penn State. The bookend to Chop Robinson there in college, and fits kind of that off-ball rusher to stand-up pass rusher for Baltimore there in round 3. Round 4, a couple of selections: Devontae Walker, speedy wide receiver out of North Carolina; TJ Tampa, long cornerback from Iowa State, falling all the way to the end of round 4. In round 5, Rasheen Ali, Marshall running back; Devin Leary, Kentucky quarterback, going in round 6. Then Nick Samak, who's a center out of Michigan State, in round 7, and Sanusi Kane, a safety from Purdue, to finish up the draft late in round 7. That is the class in 2024 for the Baltimore Ravens. Maybe not a lot of superlatives, but still a solid class, and some early contributors with some guys who could develop into contributors later down the road.
Yeah, 100%. And I've been trying to avoid B's in this process, but this was kind of the definition of a solid, non-superlative B draft for me. I think it's good. You get Wiggins at 30, a man-to-man corner that runs 4.3 with length. Like, that usually doesn't happen. The best team of the regular season usually doesn't get that player sitting where they earned their draft spot. The offseason in general, I thought, was pretty rough on the Ravens. They certainly lost more than they gained, Derrick Henry aside. But I think this draft went a long way to recouping some of those damages. This is going to sound like, Williamson hates the Steelers, or the Steeler lover hates the Ravens. But the first 2 picks, to me, like, we always joke around here, like, if the Steelers would have taken that guy, the Ravens would have, and vice versa. Like, I think there should be a 30 for 30 with Ozzie Newsome and Kevin Colbert sitting on a boat fishing, talking about how many times they stole each other's draft picks and, that type of thing. But their first 2 picks, to me, are very finesse for the Ravens. Like, Wiggins doesn't like to tackle. Rosengarten's kind of a finesse tackle. Like, they're not real AFC North Ravens-y picks.
I don't know if I would call them finesse. They're just kind of light in the pants to be able to push people around. Like, Nate Wiggins will play hard, but he's 170 pounds. Like, he looks like he's going to break in half when he's trying to come downhill on guys. So, and Roger Rosengarten's the same way. Undersized, athletic player as far as his height, weight, speed goes, but they're probably thinking, well, look, he plays with some competitiveness, so he doesn't have to play right away for us. We can put him in the weight room, and after a year or 2, you have a starting offensive tackle in the NFL. And if he doesn't work at tackle, he's got some other ability to play inside potentially. So Wiggins is an interesting one, and I thought he might fall a little bit just because he might not be for everybody. But man, he is fast, and he gives effort on the field, and Rosengarten does too, even though they're not, the biggest, strongest players. And I guess you could say the same for Adisa Isaac in round 3.
Yeah, and even Walker. I mean, he's an outside the numbers, downfield, speed type guy, not a tough guy. I mean, it's just, and I love the Tampa pick. Maybe that ends up working out for them for as late as they got him. And frankly, my favorite pick is Devin Leary. I think Devin Leary's going to stick in this league for a long time. Not a lot like Lamar, but who cares? I think he's going to be a really solid backup. I didn't love the players, but I understand the process, and they address needs pretty well.
Yeah, it's kind of boring. Solid B- is my grade here. I thought they got some fine value. TJ Tampa is an interesting one. It makes me feel better about my evaluation because a lot of people are saying he's a top 50 pick, and we put on the tape. And I was like, oh, I don't think so. I don't know if I'd even in the top 100, and nobody did. But late round 4, now you're speaking my language on TJ Tampa, and so a nice value selection there. And interesting draft class. If they end up with a couple of starters and 3 key reserves, then it's a really good class. But if Wiggins physically can't hold up to the demand of the NFL, and he's a little leggy and maybe might not be the stickiest corner despite being a 4-2 guy. Roger Rosengarten, if he doesn't develop into a starter, might look back and be like, this class didn't really even give you very much.
No, but they're back to making a lot of picks. I mean, that's a Raven thing. Last year, they only made 6. They're like the masters of the condition or comp pick game too. They do that really well. So they brought in a lot of bodies at key spots. Even Rasheen Ali, I mean, he's probably a backup for his career, but he's well known as for being good in protection. I don't know if he'll be ready on week 1, though. He's fighting an injury.
The Cincinnati Bengals, Matt, don't care about risk. Get your risk assessment out of here. They go with probably the biggest boomer bust player in this draft, like non-quarterback division, with their first round selection of Amarius Mims, 6'7", 340. We all know the scouting report. We all know he only had 8 starts. He went pretty high because those traits are hard to find. Not many humans that have his physical ability. What will he become? I have no clue, but they took the swing there at a potential franchise offensive tackle that could be a special player if he bumps his head on the ceiling of his athletic ability. At pick number 18, they came back in round 2 with another boomer bust type of a player. Doesn't have the statistical production in college, but Chris Jenkins is big, powerful, twitchy, athletic defensive tackle out of Michigan. Different player than his dad was stylistically. Then they came back with another huge boomer bust player that might have had first round ability, bounced around between schools, off field stuff. Wide receiver Jermaine Burton out of Alabama in round 3. Jackson McKinley, a 320-pound defensive tackle at the end of round 3 who doesn't play like a 320-pounder out of Texas A&M. An injury risk in Eric All out of Iowa, tight end in round 4. Josh Newton, TCU corner in round 5. A couple of 6-rounders, Tanner McLaughlin, tight end from Arizona, and Cedric Johnson, Ole Miss edge rusher. And then a couple more 7th-round picks with Daljon Anthony out of Ole Miss, a safety, and then Matt Lee, a center from Miami, to finish it up in round 7. So a big class. Obviously, some things have to go right for this to really hit for the Bengals.
I think I mentioned this the day after our favorite draft classes or whatever, but you're right. It's a very risky, volatile draft on offense. All their risky picks are Mims, Burton, All. They're all high variance outcome players, but they're all on offense. So I think there's a method to that, hey, Burrow's going to keep these guys in line, get the most out of them. His side of the ball, we're just going to take big swings. And defense, we just need solid, leadoff walks. And I thought defensive tackle was their biggest need coming into the draft. I love the Jenkins pick. I thought McKinley Jackson was massively overdrafted. I don't think he's a 3rd-round player at all. He doesn't affect the passing game. But they added 2 players at their biggest need. Mims can come along slow, which works out great for them. They obviously have a type in terms of offensive linemen and offensive tackles. Bigger the better.
Biggest hands in the league, don't they?
Yo, it's not even close. I mean, now with him, if he at guard, I mean, they're like 3 of the only linemen that are way over 350-ish. I mean, and Matt Lee's kind of a one to think about. Like, I doubt we hear from him this year, but he's a sneaky potential future starter. I kind of liked him out of Miami.
I'll drop my grade on this class for the Cincinnati Bengals next. We'll finish up there. We'll get to the Cleveland Browns as well, plus the Pittsburgh Steelers 2024 draft class grades next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is sponsored by Yahoo Finance. When it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. Now you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools you need and the data you need all in one place. They're the number one finance destination producing holistic looks at financial news cycles, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. With a community of over 90 million users each month, the real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. The number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. This episode is also brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, bringing home Lombardis, just like it's what keeps your ride or die alive and on the road. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. We're talking superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you need just wiper blades or you need something for your bumper that falls off your car, like it did for me. I love the guaranteed fit. You find the green check, you know it's the right part for your vehicle. So whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. So when you're trying to buy car parts, you're trying to burn rubber, not cash. And that's where eBay Motors comes in. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into the MVP. Bring home that huge W. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, finishing up the Cincinnati Bengals. Too much risk for me, Matt, with this class. I can't give them anything more than a C+, even though I kind of believe in Mims, and I like the Jenkins pick. So I think those two picks will be more hits than misses and really help them out long term. Because Amarius Mims, despite being quote unquote raw, he doesn't even look as raw as he should on the field. So like basically for me, it would have come down to talking to the coaches, face-to-face meetings with Mims. It's not about the tape even as much anymore for him. It's like, do you love ball? Did you just happen to have an injury in the 1 year that you were not behind other first-round picks and had an opportunity to play? If you love ball, you're going to put in the work. He's going to be a really good player in the NFL. Jermaine Burton, I don't know. Too early for me. Jackson McKinley, it's like, oh, cool, nose tackle. DJ Reader replacement, 320 pounds. He doesn't play that stout. I didn't like the film that much. I was really disappointed watching Jackson McKinley. And so
he doesn't make plays.
Yeah, all these picks, and I think there's just potentially too many misses here for where the Bengals are. So it's a C+ class for me.
I give the same grade, and I'm sure one or two of the big swings will hit, and most won't. And we didn't talk a lot about Eric All, but he has not finished either one of the last two seasons. I like his tape a lot. I mean, he's a mid-round Iowa tight end. You know, bells are going off in my head. Like that's good to hit huge.
I do like that at least he was day 3. You know, they didn't draft him
right
or anything. And then they came back with Tanner McLachlan, Arizona tight end. So if All doesn't hit, you have the backup there. So I kind of do like that tight end, you know, kind of lessening a little bit of that risk.
Yep. They've been kind of good in terms of not taking the bad boys the last couple of years, but they just couldn't help themselves with Burton, I guess, you know, like
kind of a classic, because that was their thing for a long time, right? They were the team with like the smallest scouting staff, and they kind of stuck to the board and didn't worry about the red flags that other teams passed on guys and would take seemingly players that were higher on consensus boards, but maybe the consensus boards didn't know about all the off-field stuff, and that was kind of their MO for a long time. They came back to that this year.
They did. They just couldn't. Went back to fell off the wagon. You know, they just couldn't help themselves. Real quick on Mims. So you sort of said this, and I 100% agree. I mean, 99% of the colleges in the country, he plays more than he did. You know what I mean? Like getting stuck there. I mean, if he would have went to Pitt, he would have played every snap that he possibly could since he crawled onto campus.
Right.
And I don't think he's raw as much as he's inexperienced. Like I talked about Broderick Jones a ton last year, Georgia offensive tackle, didn't have a lot of experience, but he had more than Mims. And when he got in the lineup finally for the Steelers, His technique wasn't great, and he has a lot to learn, especially in protection. But sometimes you're just so big and strong and gifted, you can get your guy blocked because you're bigger and stronger, and and learn on the fly the technique stuff.
Yeah, with Mims, it's like, okay, maybe your footwork wasn't perfect and your hand placement wasn't perfect, but you still have to orbit a planet to get around him to get to the quarterback.
Exactly. Right. I mean, he's still right while he's when he's wrong.
The Cleveland Browns here. Obviously, they didn't have early picks. They didn't pick until the 22nd selection in round 2, where they took Michael Hall Jr., Ohio State defensive tackle. Some risk there as well. Wasn't really even a starting player, but has a lot of juice to his pass rush as an interior defensive tackle. Should be at least a rotational guy early on in his career as a pass rusher from the inside, and could turn into like a really good starting defensive tackle in the NFL. But there's some questions about, how he's wired as a player. So we'll see how that goes. Came back with Zach Zinter, a guard out of Michigan, in round 3, then didn't pick again until round 5. Jamari Thrash, wide receiver from Louisville there. Nathaniel Watson, Mississippi State linebacker, in round 6, and a pair of 7th rounders, Miles Harden, South Dakota corner, and Jawan Briggs, Cincinnati defensive tackle, in round 7. Zinter is going to play. Everybody else is like, man, this class could be one of those where you look back in 5 years and go, wow, they got nothing from this draft class. So it's hard to give this a good grade just because of a lack of high-end impact. And you're really hoping that Michael Hall turns into, his maximum of what he can be, and that Zinter is a starting guard in the NFL to really help out this class and make it something that's going to impact your football team.
I mean, it's just another obvious, massive ripple effect, tidal wave effect of one of the worst trades in NFL history with Watson. I mean, now he counts $64 million against the cap. And why do I bring that up? Well, they have 2 expensive guards. Why do you think they drafted Zach Zinter? Because one of those guards probably won't be around because they're going to have cap problems, So he's a pick for another day, but he's probably the only starter of the group. And I'm looking at their last couple draft classes. I mean, no first or second rounder last year, no first or second rounder in 22. I mean, their cheap labor is brutal. How many starters are they going to get out of these last 3 drafts, 2022, 23, 24? Very few. And a perfect example is they went back to the receiver well in round 5 this year. And maybe Thrash will be okay. I don't dislike him or have strong feelings one way or another about him. But they've used a 3rd round pick on receivers 3 drafts in a row. And their top 3 receivers are all guys they had to trade for, Moore and Judy and Cooper, it's just not having picks, and I think Hall's a rotational player. My favorite pick is probably Miles Harden. I liked him quite a bit coming out of South Dakota.
I like the Zinter pick just because potentially a starter late in round 3 is solid. And that's really the only pick I'd like, above average. And I didn't give out, spoiler, I didn't give out any Fs. So I think it's a little too harsh just because we don't know what maybe we drafted 3 Hall of Famers in this class. I have no idea. But I mean, it is a D. Like, I don't know how you could come away and be like, awesome. What an amazing draft class. You know what I mean?
And maybe they got value in all their picks. Okay, maybe. I mean, none of the picks were like.
And again, aside from Zinter being pretty solid value, I would have drafted different players in probably most of those spots too.
And I think Hall at best is a rotational 3rd down type guy that could influence games here and there, but not going to play a lot of snaps for you.
I mean, Hall has deep for me too. It kind of goes back to the Mims things we just talked about. It's like, if you believe he's wired right, then he could be a pretty dynamic player, and I get why you would take him in round 2. Just too many questions for me. When you're a team that's not drafting until pick 2, you need to hit some singles and doubles here.
Yeah, they didn't have a lot of needs, but they will soon. I mean, with these last draft classes, and they will spend, and they're an aggressive organization, but they're pretty maxed out on the credit cards.
Next, Pittsburgh Steelers. How does that draft class look in 2020?
A+.
One of our favorites. I'm not going to go A+. Matt, we'll find out how he grades it next. The next segment of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by our sponsor, BetterHelp Online Therapy. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest, big or small, and certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. And it's really, you can't stress enough how important it is to not let the small thing become the big thing in your life. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Therapy can be different for everyone, and BetterHelp is designed to fit your needs. And it's entirely online. designed to be flexible and suited to your specific schedule. You decide how it is scheduled for your life at BetterHelp. And maybe if you don't hit it off with a therapist at first, that's okay. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional cost. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. The Pittsburgh Steelers class. I reach after reach here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a great class. I loved it. Matt, we talked pre-draft about the Steelers, and it was like, man, it would be really nice if someone like Troy Faltano who fell to pick 20. And man, in a perfect world, maybe even you get someone like Zach Frazier in round 2. And how about some other starters later on? If you don't get one of those guys, maybe Mason McCormick, someone you could get in round 4, and they got all of it. Like, they did it all. I can't imagine the Pittsburgh Steelers came away and thought, man, I wish it could have fallen better for us. I wish we could have got more players, and I wish we could have done a better job trying to rebuild our offensive line than what they did. Pick number 20 in round 1, Troy Faltano, versatile player, tackle guard. You probably have some insight on what he's going to play. I would like to see him try to tackle. Zach Frazier, center out of West Virginia. He's for sure a center. He is the leverage king. We've got Roman Wilson, wide receiver out of Michigan in round 3, coming back with Peyton Wilson, linebacker from NC State in round 3, Mason McCormick, South Dakota State, interior offensive lineman in round 4, Logan Lee, Iowa DT in round 6, and finishing off with Ryan Watts, Texas corner in round 6, Matt. First, talk to me about Faltano. Where's he going to play for the Steelers?
Yeah, and in one quick second, because I do a daily podcast. It's just like 10 minutes long for a local site here, DK Pittsburgh Sports. And it's also on my YouTube page. I went live today. And when I did this study, I was blown away because Omar Khan took over. This is Omar's second draft. And they went offensive tackle last year in the first round and 3 offensive linemen this year. They also drafted an offensive lineman late last year. So that's 5 linemen they drafted in Omar's stint here in 2 years. And the crux of the podcast I did was, if you look at the 10 drafts, a decade worth of drafts, after drafting David DeCastro 14 years ago, the Steelers drafted like no offensive linemen for 10 drafts in a row. I mean, none in the first round, none in the second round for 10 drafts in a row. Chuks Okorafor was like their highest pick in the 90s, and many drafts they drafted nobody. So they neglected the O-line thoroughly for a decade. And partially because they had Pouncey and DeCastro, and the line had unbelievably continuity, Villanueva and all those guys. But Omar comes in and says, that is not what we are doing. We are building this O-line, and then everything will go from there. And I think the job is now complete. You know, Frazier's going to be your center. They got a good pair of guards that they paid for, James Daniels and Siamalu. I'm almost certain that Broderick Jones will go back to his natural left tackle spot, and they're going to have Fatanu go to the right, which makes the most sense to me, which is a position change for him.
So it is a position change, but it's not an interior offensive line change. He's going to stay at tackle, but right tackle. Okay.
Yeah. They went to the podium. They said he's a tackle like 5 times.
Okay, good. So I like that. And look, if he doesn't work out, he might be great on the inside, but he's going to have competition on the inside because you got Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick as well. Is as nice as it was to see those 2 offensive linemen in round 1 and 2, was Mason McCormick your favorite pick in round 4, Matt?
Kind of. And I can almost assure you this is what happened. So if anyone listens to The Drive, another podcast I do for Steelers.com, the whole planet, I mean, I've had this conversation with you guys before. Pittsburghers think it's their God-given right to have Mike Webster, Damani Dawson, or Pouncey as their center. Right. So, it has to be round 1. You have to take Barton, or you better get Frazier, or you better get Jackson Powers Johnson. Okay, they ended up with Frazier. But going up to the draft, I said 1,000 times, if you get shut out on those top 3, my favorite next center is McCormick, and that would be a conversion, but he has a center background. He's super athletic, and I think they felt the exact same way. Like, I bet if you asked Omar going into the draft, do you think you're going to take 3 offensive linemen with your top couple picks? I bet he'd say no, but I think they liked McCormick as much as I did and just said, okay, we'll throw 1 more into the mix and see what happens. We'll have one.
That might have allowed them to play with that last 3rd round pick, that late 3rd rounder where they took Peyton Wilson.
That's the one I didn't see coming. Yeah.
But that might have had to be McCormick if they didn't get Zach Frazier already.
So 100%. Like, well, 100%.
Let's swing for the fences. Let's get a guy, even if we don't sign him to a second contract. This guy's too good to pass up here in Peyton Wilson, the NC State linebacker in round 3.
Mm-hmm. And they also signed Queen. I mean, This is another thing about this town is they're used to Lambert and Ham and Kirkland. I mean, they've had great linebackers here too. In the last couple of years, they've been really, since Ryan Shazier's injury, they've been awful. And they've just been churning through guys. And now they have Queen. Now they have Wilson. Holcomb was good, but he got hurt at the end of the year too. And Alandon Roberts. So now they have 4 really capable linebackers. And even if you only get 1 contract out of Peyton Wilson, I bet he starts over all those guys except for Queen right off the bat.
And a great opportunity for Roman Wilson, the 3rd-round wide receiver.
Yeah.
Physical, should be able to come in and play early and meet the demands of, slot receiver as a rookie and, very different player than what they have right now in that wide receiver group. So like that pick as well. I give it an A-. It's not an A+ because look, it was probably an A+ in their mind for what they were able to get for what they were trying to accomplish in this draft. But it's still, okay, cool. You drafted some offensive linemen. You didn't get your franchise quarterback or, a superstar in this class at a huge premium position unless Fotanu turns into or one of these offensive linemen turn into one of those Hall of Famers. And who knows, they could for the Steelers, the way things go for them on the offensive line historically. But it's a great draft, A-. I love what the Steelers did, and they accomplished everything they could have dreamed in this class.
I also would give it an A-. They did draft a corner late, Ryan Watts, who I knew very little about when they took him, but he has unbelievable traits. He was a 5-star recruit. I mean, he's like huge. I don't know if he's gonna be a slot or safety, whatever, but no big deal there. But you know how you do with your favorite team. I mean, to pick nits, they still don't really have a slot corner at the moment. I mean, you probably could have got one in the mid rounds or whatever. And we haven't talked about this much, but even with Roman Wilson, their wide receiver room is horrible. I mean, it's George Pickens, Roman Wilson, and then a bunch of number 4s, Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin, Scotty Miller, Marquez Callaway, Denzel Mims, if you even think Pickens is a 1, that's a leap of faith. I think Wilson's a 3, and then there's a bunch of 4s that are going to fight for spots. I mean, their receiver room's bad.
Just start Wilson and let it be the coming out party for Calvin Austin. He's my guy. He's fun to watch. Just,
I think he might get traded, I think the writings on all the little moves they've made does not indicate that they have great faith in Austin, but everyone around here does. So, you get him out there. He's fast. I'm like,
and they kind of blocked him, more slotty type of guy in Roman Wilson. And they also did that sneaky IR thing with Austin his rookie year where they almost stashed him. Like it wasn't a year-long injury. And they're like, well, you're gone for this year. It's like, okay, maybe they didn't like what they saw in camp. And they came in like, well, you're smart. You're smaller than we thought. Maybe the GM liked him and the coaches didn't or something.
Yeah. I mean, small guys have a hard time scheming them open, so it wouldn't shock me. I don't think the Ayuk stuff's going to happen, but we keep hearing DK Metcalf and Sutton, and I could see them trading a future pick and getting a starting wide receiver. If George Pickens gets hurt, I mean, forget about it. And he's a volatile guy anyway.
So still some needs there. So maybe some maneuvering to come for the Pittsburgh Steelers going forward.
I can see one big shoe to drop. Like when they traded Deontay, I'm like, oh, there's another shoe's going to drop. They got a trade lined up, and it never has come to fruition.
A- in our very scientific grades here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that is the AFC North draft classes. Let us know what you think on Twitter at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, or drop a comment or a question for our next mailbag on YouTube as well. Subscribe while you're there. Hit subscribe everywhere you listen to your podcasts and wherever you are listening to it currently. And Matt and I will be back Monday breaking down more NFC and AFC divisional draft classes and all the latest news around the NFL right here, Peacock and Williamson.